Hello. So today I am just going to get right into it because y'all, I have so many great questions. Hopefully I'll be able to get through the ones that I kind of targeted for today. Any I don't, and any additional ones that come in that I don't have time for. I'm hoping to schedule this kind of Q&A session regularly each week. Friday afternoon sometimes for my schedule work best, so we'll see how that comes out to play in terms of timing. But at any rate, I'd like to have this kind of a regular thing because I think it's great to just be able to answer some of your kind of direct questions and hear from you. What are your biggest needs and what are your biggest questions when it comes to, especially like we're talking about today, a lot of fertility, a lot of hormonal health, a lot of thyroid specifically related, and then just how does nutrition factor into all of that in terms of using that truly as food as medicine, lifestyle as medicine, using that to make our bodies and our hormones and everything that we have better and more optimal. So like I said, we're going to get right into it today. So for those of you who don't know me or we haven't gotten a chance to meet, my name is Jennifer. I am a registered dietitian in the Dallas, Texas area, and my kind of segmented specialty audience is women who are with hypothyroidism, who are struggling to conceive or dealing with unexplained infertility, couples that are dealing with that. So many times that just means we haven't found the reason yet. And instead of feeling unexplained and broken, we work together to dig deeper, to find the reasons, to nurture those, to nourish those, and to lead you to hormonal optimization, health, and hopefully and optimally into conceiving. So I do work a lot with hormones. There's a lot that goes into them, and that's why there's a lot of questions. So like I said, let's get right into it. So I'm going to help with putting these questions up on the screen while we talk. And that doesn't look very good. That. And of course, it's too big for the screen. Tech, I love it. Well, I'm going to kind of leave it up there. I guess I'll take it down because maybe it's a little bit more distracting than helpful. But this first question is, I'm kind of going from general to more specific. And this was one of the most general that I got. So it's, what is the best way to determine if you actually have a thyroid problem? So anyway, we're going to take that off because that's a little distracting, I think. Anyway, okay, so what is the best way to determine if you have a thyroid problem? Great question. The first thing I would say is if you've got these, what we call classic symptoms of thyroid, hypothyroidism, and I say hypothyroidism because that is the more diagnosed and more problematic condition that we see with the thyroid is hypo, underworking, low functioning, versus hyper, which is overworking or overfunctioning. Hypothyroidism is 90+% of the thyroid conditions, disease, whatever word we want to give it that we see. So one thing I would say in terms of how do we really know if it's a thyroid problem, what are your symptoms? Do you have these classic, what we would say classic symptoms of hypothyroidism, extreme fatigue, and I don't mean just fatigue like, oh, I didn't sleep well, I'm tired. I mean a constant presence of low energy, that might even transfer into low mood, in terms of just you don't have that oomph, you don't have that kind of that fire within you. Sometimes it can even progress into things like dry skin, hair loss. Hair follicles have receptors on them, and when your thyroid is not working well, that can be one of the things that kind of your body says, hey, we can let go of this. I don't need to work very hard here. So we see hair loss. That's a whole different kind of what we call it, mechanism there, why that causes it. Constipation, a lot of digestive problems. It slows your digestion down. So not only do you feel things like reflux and GERD, if we want to give it that kind of more diagnosable term, but you can see slow digestion. So constipation, irregularities there, female hormonal dysregulation in menstruating women. Maybe you see anovulation, you're not ovulating. That can lead to no period at all. It can lead to irregular cycles. It can lead to light periods. It can lead to heavy periods. So the menstrual irregularities can be kind of vast. So those are the one thing, in terms of saying, what is the best way to determine, do you have those symptoms? And if you do, let's keep going till we figure that out. And one of the best ways to figure that out is to looking at what we call a full or complete or comprehensive thyroid panel. And most doctors stop and start at a TSH, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone. That's a hormone from your brain, from your pituitary in your brain to your thyroid gland to say, hey, wake up, get up, work, do your thing. So TSH is really not a thyroid marker at all. It's a brain hormone that signals your thyroid. So it has kind of an indirect relationship with your thyroid gland. So that's why we want to look at that full panel. It's got 8 markers on it that look at the full complete picture. And I'll just kind of list them out really quick. So that would be TSH. You do want that because we want to know where it's at. You've got 2 things that your thyroid produces. One is T4. So a total T4 and a total T3. Then we want to look at a free T4 and a free T3. Those are what are unbound and available to your cells for them to use. So a total and a free T4 and T3. Then we want to look at the 2 thyroid antibodies, thyroglobulin and TPO antibodies. And then we want to look at something called reverse T3. And it's not only good to look at all the numbers, it's good to look at all the numbers as they relate to each other. So getting even more specific once we see those numbers and seeing, okay, what is your, reverse T3 compared to your total, or your reverse T3 compared to your free T3. We want to see those in a certain ratio. What is your T4 to T3? What is this, So we want to kind of get a little bit more fine-tuned in that. Some other things to look at is looking at vitamin D levels. Usually with hypothyroidism, we see vitamin D very low or deficient. Iron levels, your thyroid needs iron to work and to make its hormones. A big thing, and this is getting away from the thyroid gland itself, but is to look at gut health. Do some gut testing to look at your gut bacteria. About 20% of your thyroid hormone is converted in your intestine. So if we've got an unbalanced gut, the gut can't do its job at using those enzymes, using those proteins and things like that to make that conversion happen. In relation to that, also looking at liver health, about 60% of your thyroid hormone is converted in your liver. So if our liver is under functioning or liver enzymes are high, or we've just got some kind of dysregulation there, that can affect our thyroid gland as well. And then looking at how is your nutrient intake, specifically of nutrients like selenium and zinc, which are imperative for that thyroid conversion from the inactive to the active hormone. Other thing, I mentioned iron, not only in your blood, but in your diet. Iodine, I don't want to go supplement with iodine. That's a really, really kind of Goldilocks hormone when it comes to the thyroid needing not too much and not too little. But again, just looking at kind of your intake as a whole, what does that nutrient intake look like and how is that affecting how your thyroid's working? So those are kind of some things to look at, again, to review what are your symptoms, the full thyroid panel, looking at vitamin D levels, looking at your iron panel, full iron panel, looking at some gut testing, gut healing, if that needs to happen, liver function, and then just looking at that kind of intake as a whole and making sure that you're really robust in some of those nutrients that your thyroid needs to function. So that was that question. Okay, I'm going to try this, but I think it's going to be the same in terms of quality. Yep. Well, that one shows a little bit more, but at any rate, this question is, you can see a little bit, can Hashimoto's, and I abbreviated it there for sake of, wait, hold on. This is not the second one. Hold on, let me go back. Yeah, there it is. Sorry. What's the difference between Hashimoto's and regular, what we call regular hypothyroidism? So let's get this silly slide off because, again, it did not fit the screen well. I'll just leave them off from now on. I just thought it would help to see the question while we're still talking about it. But anyway, okay, so what is the difference between Hashimoto's disease and regular, quote unquote, hypothyroidism? Great question, because there is a big difference. They're related. So Hashimoto's disease is and this goes back to why we test those antibodies. Hashimoto's is the autoimmune condition that affects your thyroid gland. So Hashimoto's at its root is not a thyroid problem. it's a problem with your immune system, because your immune system is now kind of gone rogue and gotten confused and gotten a little overzealous. And instead of attacking viruses and pathogens and colds and flu and diseases that are going around right now, it begins to attack itself. Now, there's dozens of autoimmune disease. Hashimoto's is one of those. So, for whatever reason, and there are specifics, that it comes down to even looking at sometimes genetics. It comes to that, going back to that gut function like I talked about, and then looking at what is that's triggered my autoimmune system to now see my thyroid as an invader and as a something to be attacked. We need to kind of reset that, and we need to tell it, no, this is not something you need to attack. This is something that is safe and that is life. We need it for our life. So when we look at general, or what someone asked, the normal hypothyroidism, we kind of see that on a spectrum. And, we can have this initial immune response. And the reason why, going back to that first question, I say we've got to see this full panel, is those antibodies, those little immune cells that get in there and attack your thyroid gland. That can be going on for 8 to 10 to longer, if we don't test them, years before we actually see the actual thyroid numbers get out of line and go out of whack. So this autoimmune attack can happen for many years before we actually see the thyroid function kind of decrease. Now, general hypothyroidism, or regular, again, what someone called it, hypothyroidism, that can be seen at a couple levels. One, we can have glandular hypothyroidism. Something is wrong with my thyroid gland, so it's not producing enough hormone. That can be caused by this autoimmune attack. That can be caused by surgery. That can be caused by medications that damage it. So we're talking about damage to the gland itself. That can cause your thyroid to not make enough or not make sufficient thyroid hormone. We can also have what we call cellular hypothyroidism. Your thyroid is making enough hormone, but what it's making, in the amount it's making, your cells, when they get that hormone, it's either not enough, they don't receive it well, the receptors are kind of off. So it becomes a cellular problem, not a problem of my thyroid's not working. The problem is somewhere else kind of down the line. And that's, again, where I was going back to that at the very beginning, looking at those ratios of where are those hormones, in relation to each other. That shows us, yes, okay, this is lower than it should be. That means I'm not converting this well. That means I probably don't have enough for my cells. That means, if I give more of this hormone, it's not going to help me because I can't convert it to the active hormone. So again, kind of going backwards to look at where is that real problem. So those are kind of the two ways that we can have a hypothyroid problem. One is the glandular problem. We have a problem with the cell, with the gland itself. That's where Hashimoto's comes in, or any of those other kind of damaging effects to the thyroid, or at that cellular level where we're making it, our cells just aren't using it. Now, in the kind of traditional allopathic conventional model, all hypothyroidism, I'm not going to use superlatives here, but many times is treated as a glandular problem. Oh, your TSH is too high. We just need to give you thyroid hormone because your thyroid's not working well. We'll just give you more hormone. Well, what if the hormone part is not the problem? That's why we need to check that full panel. Because sometimes if you give more hormones, yet the problem is down the line at a cellular level, we're not going to be helping. It's like giving you more stuff that you can't do anything with. And that can send your thyroid kind of into this really confusing place to begin to shut down mechanisms because we're taking too much in from the outside, yet it still can't go in and convert all those things. So I hope that's a really long, convoluted answer because these are such great questions. So I'm trying to encapsulate them in a way that hopefully is understandable. At any rate, so the big difference between Hashimoto's and normal, I keep using air quotes, or regular hypothyroidism is one, hypothyroidism is just we are not making enough thyroid hormone, or the hormone we are making is not being received well and utilized by our cells. Hashimoto's thyroiditis or Hashimoto's disease is when the gland itself is being attacked by antibodies. Usually that starts very early. That's why we want to check those antibodies before there's a problem. And we want to check them over time, as we're monitoring that to make sure they're not going up. And that's when the gland is actually being attacked. And we're going to get to what do I do with Hashimoto's in just a minute because somebody else had that question too. So, okay, I'm just making a few notes of myself too, so I don't skip anything important. All right, so the third question is, yep, we're going to try it again here because you know what? I made these. We're just going to roll with this because that's what this is. And if it didn't fit my slides, we're just going to make do. I'm going to figure out how to do these better. Okay, so what's the best thing to do to lower antibodies and put Hashimoto's into, and the last word there is remission. So somebody asked, what is the best way, if you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, what is the best way to lower your antibodies and put Hashimoto's into remission? Can that happen? Absolutely, yes. I've seen it done. I've worked with people who that has been done. And so again, let's go back to what it is. Hashimoto's is an immune problem. At the end of the day, it's a problem with your immune system. Your thyroid has just been the victim of that attack. It doesn't mean at the beginning of that your thyroid has a problem, or your thyroid doesn't have a problem yet, unless we allow those antibodies to keep attacking, keep punching, keep getting your thyroid down over time, and we don't do anything about it. That's when you begin to have a thyroid problem. Okay, so hopefully that difference is clear. How do we stop those antibodies? How do we stop that immune system from attacking yourself? Again, dozens of autoimmune diseases. I wish I had time to go in some of those, but at the end of the day, your immune system is attacking your own tissue, your own cells. We need to tell that to stop. So with Hashimoto's, here are some specific ways to address that. Now, some of these, again, involve a little bit more testing because I don't like to just jump in with all of these things right at once because then we don't know, okay, was it this that helped? Was it that helped? We want to know, kind of be strategic with it in a way to we know what we're doing is making an impact, or that one next step that we took, well, that didn't do anything, so maybe that's not my issue. So one of the things that you'll hear a lot with Hashimoto's is going off gluten and going off of sometimes dairy. Those two are very, very big protein molecules. They are very difficult for a lot of people to digest. They're very complex, and if you don't have all the right enzymes intact and as robustly as you need them to be, we have a problem getting those digested and broken down. Now, the unique thing with gluten is that it's kind of a, what do we call it? When you have like a imposter, right? When somebody looks just like somebody else and they're trying to be that person, gluten can do that and bind to your thyroid in lieu of thyroid hormones. So it can get in there and it has this kind of way of messing up your thyroid hormones, and it can cause this. So then we feel this like, wait, this is not supposed to be here. What is this? And then our thyroid function seems to be low. Well, it's because gluten is getting in there, and it's sciencey term molecular mimicry. The molecules look similar. They mimic each other, and so they can bind to each other's receptors, and that means when the bad gets in there, the good has nowhere to go. So it's ineffective. So that's why a lot of people with Hashimoto's are told or recommended to avoid gluten. Do I think that that is a good thing to do? Honestly, yes. But here's my caveat with this one. Before somebody goes and 100% eliminates gluten, which is a whole nother topic because nowadays that's extremely hard to do, to be 100%. Before somebody goes and does that, I want to have a full and complete blood celiac panel run. Here's why. Many autoimmune diseases, like I said, there are dozens. If you've got one, there's others that are kind of lurking in there. Because of the relation of gluten and Hashimoto's and your thyroid, I like to run a full celiac panel to see, and that includes genetics. What are your genetics? Do you even have the wiring, kind of like electricity in your home? If you've got the wiring there, you're primed for it. You might not ever go turn the light switch on in that room to open, the wires and connect all the electricity. So we might not ever have it, but I want to know if you're wired to have it and if your genes are able to be turned on for celiac disease. If they're not, there's not much more to do there. If they are, then we go further, and this is what a full celiac panel does. It looks at all the inflammatory markers. Is your body responding to gluten right now in an inflammatory kind of way? Are those markers elevated? Next step, if those all come back high, would be an invasive intestinal biopsy. That's kind of this gold standard that they say. But that's not always needed right at the beginning, because this one test, especially this one I run, is very comprehensive, and it will look at all the things we need to see, okay, is this even like part of you? Could this happen? So before you eliminate gluten, short story that I made really long, is do a full celiac panel. Next, in terms of trying to lower your antibodies, what nutrients could be deficient in you? I mentioned earlier selenium and zinc. Those are two crucial nutrients that the thyroid needs to convert those hormones. And as well as I mentioned iron, iodine. I don't recommend any supplementation in isolation in some of these, unless you're working with somebody who knows the levels and knows where you're at, especially, and I'm going to say it here, don't go supplement with iodine. Especially if you have Hashimoto's, that can totally backfire on you. Iodine's a very, what I call Goldilocks nutrient. It needs to be just right. Too much can throw your antibodies out the roof again. Too little for your thyroid doesn't help it work, it can't work enough. Can't form the thyroid hormones. You need those 4 and the 3 on the T4 and T3. Those are iodine molecules. So you need iodine to make those. And if we are deficient, I usually tell people, if you're taking a really nice, robust multivitamin, stick with the amount that's in that multivitamin. It's usually on the ballpark of 150 to maybe 200 micrograms. Micro, that means we need really little amounts of iodine. So stick to that in terms of iodine intake. Do not go like an isolated iodine supplement. It can really throw Hashimoto's into a tizzy. Next, I would say for Hashimoto's, look for those gut infections. Look for what bacterial balance or imbalance do we have. You are bacterially, you have more DNA than you do human DNA. We are more bacterial than we are human. And when that balance gets off, it can really throw off everything down the road. We need those bacteria, because I call bacteria in your gut kind of like your coworkers or workers in a factory, right? The workers are all there, great, okay? But it's what the workers do that is either productive or not productive. And that's the same as bacteria. We go and we pump ourselves with all these probiotics, thinking probiotics are good. But if those aren't the ones that we need, or those are the ones that are there and they're doing their job, we've just got these other ones that are kind of producing all these things that they don't need, and we need to either outnumber them, or we need to kind of use some antimicrobials to kind of kill them off a little bit. And some of those specifically can have autoimmune, what they produce, have autoimmune type tendencies to inflame and cause that to keep going and to exacerbate that condition. So that's why it's really good to get a gut profile done, stool test, to look at what are the bacteria there. What are they, what are they balancing, what's balanced out. Sometimes H. pylori is something that is seen a lot with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. So looking for that within a gut test as well is really important to do. And I do use one that covers all those bases. It looks at even pancreatic enzymes, to look at what are your enzymes producing, or what is your pancreas producing in terms of enzymes for food digestion. Again, we go back to at the beginning when I said hypothyroidism will slow down that gut motility. It's, if we've got constipation and we've got bacteria sitting in there that should not, all of those things are going to be reabsorbed. Those are going to be in too high a quantity, and we need to be getting those out. And sometimes that is, I don't want to call it a fix, but that's really brings about healing in and of itself, is when we get that gut moving, we get those gut bacteria a little less super saturated, and we kind of get that motion going on there. But sometimes hypothyroidism, again, can just kind of constrict those muscles and slow down that digestion. Lastly, well, not lastly, but one of the biggest things too is with Hashimoto's, to kind of lower those antibodies. Sometimes, again, let's go back. Hashimoto's is an immune problem, and when our immune system is kind of overactivated, and it's thinking that we're sick, and it's kind of putting out all these chemicals to protect us. It's a big stress. It's a big kind of stress to our body. We think of stress as like, oh my gosh, I've got too much to do today, or she told me this and it upset me, or I've gotten this argument, and that's stress too. But we also have to think about stress at a cellular level. What is our body being stressed with? Again, that over-functioning and over-responsive immune system is a big stress. So one of those things that can kind of exacerbate that I see with a lot of people is over-exercising, because that is a huge stress to your body. If you think of, again, sciencey word, hormetic stress, it's a protective stress. It's good to go stress yourself and kind of lift weights that are maybe a little heavy for you and kind of stress those muscles a little bit, because then as they repair, they actually grow and they get bigger and they get more resilient. So there's good stress, but then when we get to that, we kind of cross that boundary into a stress level, especially when it comes to exercise, of overdoing it and overextending ourselves, and we end a workout feeling 50 times worse than when we started, or thinking, okay, she feels super great when she leaves her 90-minute HIIT class, and I can't get through the first 30 minutes without almost passing out. Well, your body's talking to you. That's not your exercise. That's not your way of telling your body, let's become more metabolically active. Just as I would not be able to go out and run a marathon right now because I'm not metabolically set for that. My body's not made for that. And we want to give our body that metabolic stress, that exercise and movement stress that is enough without overstressing it. And again, overstressing that immune response that we've already got going on. Because when we are overstressed immune-wise, our body wants to protect us. Our body needs to turn down kind of everything else because it doesn't know how long this is going on. Is this going to be going on for the next 10 years for her? So we need to preserve some things and preserve her energy and preserve her metabolism. Or is this just a 30-minute workout? So as you get used to that kind of new rhythm, again, watching out for over-exercising, and if it is something like a new Hashimoto's diagnosis, really just tuning down, if that's been your norm, tuning down some of that overactivity and letting your body heal, letting your body kind of take that stress off, so it can say, okay, this part of me doesn't have to overwork right now. I can devote my energy to digesting this food or to absorbing these nutrients or something like that. So those are kind of some of those, again, what is the best way to lower your antibodies? We talked about gluten and dairy, but why I think it's really important to get a full celiac panel before you do that. Looking at nutrient deficiencies, looking at gut balance and imbalances and pathogens, and then looking at what is your exercise like right now. And going back to, I'll add this last one, to just looking at your food intake as a whole and your nourishment and how that looks like, what that looks like in keeping it back to real whole foods as much as possible, as much as looks like, you can look at a food and say, okay, I can totally envision this in its growing space. I can totally envision this pear on a tree. I can totally envision this potato in the ground. It looks as close to its original growing state. If it's an animal food, as intact as that protein can be, a chicken leg versus chicken nuggets. So keeping it as familiar to the animal, the plant, the growing condition as possible can just ensure that your body's getting food that it knows what to do with and as much nutrient composition as you can have. So there we go on the best way to lower your antibodies. Okay, next this is a big one. I could spend a whole hour on this one, so I'm going to try to make this one as brief as possible. And let's see if I can... where is the slide for that one? my slides are just not working today. They're too big anyway. So for those of you who have joined, I had all these great, awesome slides, and they're too big for the screen. So anyway, the next one is about Hashimoto's and infertility. And the specific question was, the specific question was, sorry, I was just making sure I didn't mince the words. Does Hashimoto's affect my fertility? My doctor says it's not related. That was her specific question. And my short answer, if we give it a yes or no, does Hashimoto's affect your fertility or cause, if I could say infertility? Yes, it can. And here's what I would say Hashimoto's affects your fertility. Does it cause, is it the cause of your infertility? I can't say that, but it does affect fertility, and here's why. And our next question is going to is going to kind of expand on this as well. So I'll kind of roll into both of these at the same time. So does it affect your fertility? Yes, because again, let's go back to the fact, and I keep saying this over and over again, but Hashimoto's is an immune problem. It's not a thyroid problem. It's an immune problem that affects and hurts your thyroid, that gives you a thyroid problem. So Hashimoto's, when we have an overactive immune system, your immune system is just like, think about soldiers on a battlefield, that everything they hear, every little rustle in the leaves, they're turning and they're just crazy. They're ready to shoot. They're ready to, to attack. And that's kind of what your immune system does. So any foreign thing, anything that comes in, it sees as, is this new? Do I need to attack it? Is this, good? Is this bad? And it kind of rushes to the scene. So what Hashimoto's can do, or even hypothyroidism, let's expand that into just hypothyroidism in general, is it can decrease ovulation, for starters, because when your thyroid, one of its main jobs is to keep you safe. It's a metabolic activator. It works to, and when I say metabolism, most people think of burning calories. Okay, does it do that? Yes. But when I say metabolism, the larger picture to see is we're working at a cellular level to work inside your cells and give your cells the hormones, the factors, all the things that they need to go through all these processes for you to keep you alive. Okay, and that's what your thyroid does. It's really good at that, and it's really good at regulating that, and it's very resilient. And when it senses, as this hypothyroidism kind of brings itself into the picture, whether it's glandular, cellular, whatever, all those things I said before, when that function is not there, when the thyroid's not able to help you the way it should, it's got to help protect you. And one of the things it does, it says, hey, this environment right now, I'm barely like keeping her going well and keeping her alive and healthy and vibrant. We cannot support another life. Let's tell those female hormones to shut down a little bit, and we're going to shut that system down. Okay, so it's kind of a protective mechanism. It's a feedback mechanism, feedback loop a little bit of how your hormones, they're influencers in your body. They get in there and they talk to each other, and when one hormone gets out of whack, it's kind of got this cascade effect all the way down the line. So that's why hypothyroidism in general can very much be a detriment to fertility. Hashimoto's on top of that adds a whole nother kind of element to that. So let's break those both down. So hypothyroidism, like I said, will turn down many times your female hormone kind of cascade. We're talking estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, even testosterone. It kind of changes that a little bit. But it talks to all of these collectively to say, guys, shut down. We don't need you right now. So when we see that follicle stimulating hormone decrease, we don't need the follicles, we don't need the ovulation, so we see ovulation decrease. When we don't ovulate, we don't secrete progesterone, because progesterone comes from that corpus luteum after the egg is released, and then we have this little kind of new organ, really new part of you that your body makes to secrete that progesterone until it knows that there's an implanted fertilized egg. And at that point, different process. But anyway, so ovulation will go down. That means progesterone will go down, or ovulation will stop altogether. It can decrease total egg quality, because again, if we're telling your ovaries and all these hormones to stop producing eggs, well, the eggs they do produce, if they do get a little like spurt of life, it's not going to be great because there's not enough fuel there. There's not been enough messaging there to say, hey, it's time. Let's do this. So overall, egg quality can go down. Total ovarian reserve can go down. And I'm using these terms because these are a lot of terms that women dealing with fertility struggles are hearing. You know, you've got decreased ovarian reserve. Your egg quality is, bottomed out, is bad. This and that and the. Well, again, let's go backwards. What's causing this? You don't just stop producing eggs because at a fertile age. You don't just have bad quality eggs. Usually there's something to it. Let's expand that a little bit to Hashimoto's, is when we've got this autoimmune attack, we've got this immune system looking for things, and we have this new embryo implanting this new egg, basically just at this point, this little mass of beautiful baby-to-be cells, right, implanting in your uterine tissue. And then our immune system says, whoa, what's this? Okay. Rates of miscarriage can increase, very early miscarriage can increase at that point. Sometimes later miscarriages are because of cellular kind of DNA fragmentations and things like that, which again can come back to some nutrient deficiencies as well. So you've got this kind of multifaceted, A, your body's actually trying to protect you, but B, when you're trying to get pregnant, you don't want that. So that's why looking at this full thyroid panel, again, let's go back to the very beginning, is so important for women who are talking about wanting to get pregnant. For sure, if you've been struggling with your fertility, or and most certainly, and my heart goes out to you, and I just want to hug you through the screen, is if you've had repeated miscarriages or miscarriages at all, to just rule this out as, could this be one of those things that's contributing to my body saying, turn this system down, we can't, this is not a safe environment right now. Like I mentioned, nutrient deficiencies can prevent, a lot of B vitamins can prevent that cellular division, that those very early, the very early embryo goes through this rapid cell division in the first weeks and even through the first trimester. This is rapid period of growth. And if you don't have enough nutrients to facilitate that, again, it's your body saying, hey, we're out of resources. We can't keep doing this. And unfortunately, the result can be, a miscarriage. So that's a big way of saying, can hypothyroidism and or Hashimoto's be causing my fertility struggles? 100% yes. Is it the cause? I can't say that, but it could definitely be playing in. Okay, next question. Again, too big. What other, and I put in here reproductive because I had her clarify, what other reproductive hormones do you usually see out of balance with low thyroid function? So she was asking, okay, if you have hypothyroidism, what other reproductive hormones might go with that? That's why I said this kind of encompasses what I just talked about, so I'll just reiterate that a little bit. When you have, and then I'll expand too, when you have hypothyroidism, it's going to most likely decrease your ovulation or decrease your egg quality, which is going to decrease progesterone, which is going to prevent any kind of implantation from happening, because progesterone is what makes that uterine lining really like nice and spongy and a warm place for that embryo to attach and embed. Estrogen builds the uterine lining, progesterone perfects the uterine lining. And when you don't have that, you don't have a space that egg is going to really implant and be able to grow. So you've got this cascade of hormonal things that can go on with when we see hypothyroidism. The other thing that I would say is if we're looking at just, let's say, estrogen and progesterone, again, and those need to be checked on the right days of the month and looked at their relationship to each other. People talk about estrogen dominance. Many times that's progesterone insufficiency. It's not that you're making too much estrogen. It could be, or it could be you're not detoxifying your estrogen properly, so it kind of builds up or it recycles or reabsorbs into your system. But many times it's just you're not making enough progesterone to balance out that proliferative, robust kind of mover and a shaker that estrogen is. But high levels of estrogen can also do a few things to directly, and when I say estrogen, I need to be careful there too. You don't actually have something in your body called estrogen. You've got three main types of estrogens. And estrogen 1, 2, and 3 is kind of their easy names. But you've got estrone, which is number 1. You've got estradiol, that's number 2. That's the most kind of abundant and most checked on serum labs, estradiol. And then you've got estriol, which is E3. Little different there. We won't go into all the different types of estrogen, but having high levels of estrogen can actually raise something called your the binder proteins for your thyroid, thyroxine binding globulin. And when we raise that, again, your body's protecting you. It's got, oh my gosh, we've got all this estrogen and we don't want too much, so let's secrete this binding protein to go bind it up. Well, that's also going to bind up more of your thyroid hormone because that's what it does. Thyroxine binding globulin, it goes to protect you, to kind of keep levels in check. And if we're binding up too much of that because estrogen is too high, then we've got an effect on your thyroid that we don't want. Estrogen can also reduce your thyroid's ability to uptake iodine, which, like I said earlier, is necessary to make those T4 and T3 hormones. So if we don't have enough iodine, again, reminder, don't go supplement. We got to check the levels. But if we don't have enough, your thyroid will not be able to manufacture the thyroid hormone as abundantly as it needs to for your body. And then also what I was going to say is with estrogen, I'll go back to that detoxification. Sometimes it's not that you're making too much, it's that you can't get rid of it. Okay? You're not overproducing, your body's just not metabolizing it and breaking it down well. And that's where some of the more specific and more direct hormone tests that we do, not blood tests, but urine tests to look at things like how are you methylating? What are your estrogens doing in terms of the good estrogens, the bad estrogens? Are we going down the right pathways? You can even go so far as to look at some of your genetics. There's something called COMT. It's a gene that you can look at and an enzyme that helps you break down and what's called methylate. That's the M in the COMT is methyl group, and it helps you break down those estrogens. And then we also, again, going back to that gut test, we look at, are we getting the estrogens out? If we look at a stool test and we have some high levels of scientifically something called beta-glucuronidase, we know, boy, that estrogen that's all bound up, ready to get out, she's making all this stuff that's opening up this package again and letting estrogen back out into her system. So again, estrogen dominance doesn't always mean you're making too much. It could mean you're not getting it out, you're not metabolizing it, you're not methylating it, you're not excreting it, and that's what causes, again, going back to the thyroid, how it can actually exacerbate those thyroid symptoms of too much binding globulin, not enough iodine availability, and then all those kind of other downstream effects that I talked about last question about how hypothyroidism affects your fertility. So again, a really great question, a really long answer, and one that I'm so glad you asked because it's very, very, we can see how all of this is interrelated, and we can't isolate one hormone level from another. We can't isolate one system in your body from another. We can't just look at your reproductive system in this little, 8-inch window and say, oh yeah, everything looks good. I don't know why you're not able to conceive, so you're unexplained. Sorry. Let's look at the whole body. Let's look. Okay, these are hormones. These are influencers. These are people that need help and they help others, so we have to know how they're talking to each other. And then lastly, and I think I'm perfect on time here, so I picked the right number of questions. Anything else I can save till next time. But okay, just doing it because I got it. Not great, but I'll work on it for next time. This was a super question, and I loved hearing this from somebody. She said, I'm overwhelmed and used the word triggered by drastic diet changes. What are the simplest, can't see the rest, what are the simplest changes I can make if I've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism? This is such a great question. And here's why I think it's so great, is because so many, I've done this, I've been the recipient of it, and so I've learned a whole lot along the way about when somebody has this problem, right? Or this new diagnosis. We want to just fix it with all the things. Change your diet, change your exercise, take these supplements, go to sleep, wake up. It's like they're asking you to literally change your whole life overnight. That's not going to happen. It's just not. It's not good. I can't do that. I can't expect others to do that. I've been asked to do that as a patient before, and I just have to sift through that and go, okay, what's the lowest hanging fruit here? What's the first one thing I can do that's going to make the biggest impact on, the most of what I need to change? So, love this question. And one thing I would say is, if you're overwhelmed, if you're feeling triggered by maybe past eating, not disorders, but kind of challenged eating, maybe restrictive eating or overly restrictive dieting, and somebody goes and says, okay, now you need to avoid this, and you need to avoid this, and you begin to get flooded with all this, okay, now I just need to avoid everything. One thing I would say with that is, again, I got to see what does your intake look like now? Is it all from, opening bags and boxes and heating up food? Or is it all, whole foods, real foods, nutrient-rich diet, and there's not a lot we need to fine-tune there. We just need to look at other parts of your life. I see nourishment as this whole picture, as I share with my clients. Nourishment to me is the center of a flower, and we've got nutritional nourishment, physical nourishment, relational nourishment, emotional, mental, and spiritual nourishment, all a part of how you are nourishing your body. And if I were just to isolate this perfect plate of food for you every day and say, okay, there you go, there's your key to health, eat perfectly, right? We all know what's good and bad to eat. I mean, if we want to quantify it that way. So that's not always the issue. We need to look deeper. We need to look at more expansive at an individual's life rather than a template or a checkoff box. So one thing I would say is if you're not, just begin to look at your food as, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, how real does that food look in terms of where it was growing or where it was living? Does it look, can I identify that food, or is it so scientifically created that I don't quite know what else is in it, and it doesn't really look like the form it used to be? So your body's going to say the same thing. I'm not really sure what this is. So, before you go restrict anything, eliminate anything, just begin to look at food that way and say, what is the most real looking food that I can eat? What is made by, a tree, a farmer, what was naturally growing versus what did they create in a lab? So that's one first thing I would say. Secondly, I would say check that exercise. Where is your exercise? Does your body need that physical nourishment in a different way right now? 60 to 90 minute HIIT classes aren't the prescription for a lot of us. In fact, that's very rare that somebody can really do that and stay metabolically well. Unless they are nourishing themselves so specifically and so strategically that they are repleting everything else that their body is using at this high level. Their sleep is just on point. They're taking the right vitamins in the right form and the right, all this. So maybe taking a step back from physical exercise and realize exercise, movement can be sitting and breathing. Movement can be sitting outside in the sun to nourish your body with rest. It can be taking a walk, a stroll versus a run. It can be a 20-minute yoga or Tai Chi versus a 90-minute heated yoga. Okay, so looking again where you are and to see what could maybe scale back or just fine tune there a little bit what I'm already doing. I would say sometimes it comes down to not eating enough, because if our body, again, does not get that message that we are safe, that we are nourished, that we have enough nutrients, it will turn down all those volume dials again. It will turn down the thyroid. It will turn down the female hormones. It will turn down those things to say we've got to keep her safe because she's not eating enough to nourish and to get all the nutrients we need. So we got to protect her. We've got to step in here. So sometimes it can be not eating enough. And again, not knowing what your plates look like, what your intake looks like. I can't say yes you are or no you're not. Another thing when it comes to supplements, if you're working with somebody and they throw 14 at you and they're like, okay, this one, like you're literally, your day is, controlled by when you're taking supplements, just be frank and just say, okay, I need one. Like, what's one that I could start with and get into this rhythm of taking it? Because I never take these things. And especially if sometimes, if you're new to like a thyroid medication, that's a big change in of itself, because thyroid medication is such a diva. It needs to be taken at the right time, with the right beverage, with the right amount of space between food and supplements. I mean, it's a new thing. So just being really honest with your practitioner about, here's where it's doable for me. After this, I can't do this. So let's set the expectation for both of us to know what these results are going to bring about. And if you don't have that in a practitioner, okay, y'all, this is easier said than done, but keep looking out for one. Keep seeking one out that, you can find that relationship with, you can find that openness and frankness with, in terms of, what they're asking you to do, what you're able to do, and the expectations that you both have for each other. Because certainly when you have a new diagnosis, that's overwhelming enough. And overwhelm, to me, is kind of a funny word, because usually it means we just haven't learned enough about that yet. Okay? If I asked you to go, I'm assuming that y'all can all ride a bike, maybe. If I asked you to go out and ride a bike, would you be overwhelmed? Probably not. If I asked a 4-year-old to go out and ride a bike with no training wheels, they'd never been on a tricycle before, and I asked them to go ride this 2-wheeler bike, would they be overwhelmed? Yeah, because they've never done it before. It's hard. They're going to fall. They don't even know like what it feels like to be on a bike and feel that imbalance. So it's overwhelming because it's new, it's different, and they have to learn about it. And that's the same with anything. Anytime we have a new, if we're talking medical diagnosis or recommendation, when it's new to us, it can be very overwhelming because we just don't know enough yet. So it's taking that step back honestly in your own life to say, okay, here's up to this point, I'll call it not so overwhelming, but after this, you've lost me, because that's no good. Because I've seen clients who do that and then they come back and they say, I stopped everything because, it was just too much, instead of getting in touch and, saying, what's the one thing? So that's how I kind of wrap that up. But a super great question, a super transparent question to ask, because we should never be expected to do all the things. Even if all the things are great, what is the one thing that can make the biggest impact for me, for my health, for my life, for my plate, for my fill in the blank? So that's how I would answer that one. Woo! Okay, this was great. Perfect timing. I'm glad I chose the right number of questions in terms of the ones that I got, and I hope I encapsulated a lot of helpful information for you. Like I said, I plan to do this on a weekly basis to hear from you, to answer your questions, to maybe go deeper with some of these or to review some of these. I will be saving these videos and using them and repurposing them, so they'll be available to come back to. But I would love to just keep this conversation going. So if you do have more questions, please leave them below in the comments. Please feel free to DM me. Please get in touch with me however is most convenient for you. And I would love to answer those specifically. And look forward to next time. I'll post it again in regard to next week. I'm thinking about the same time next Friday, so we'll go from there. But thank you all for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. And again, just let me know below any more questions you have, and we'll get those answered. So y'all have a great weekend and stay healthy, right? Bye.